I've actually recorded this video a few different times now, and I've decided to change direction on how I'm going to approach this topic. Originally, when I recorded it, I just gave like a brief overview of the Pergear CF Express Type A cards, and then I took the memory card out of the camera after the recording, and it was very warm. So instead, I've decided to now just to do a few tests with it instead. In the video that I recorded, which I've now since deleted, I discussed certain topics like the Pergear CF Express Type A memory card is so new to the market that no one can actually compare and test for reliability. There's a couple of videos out there where they've used it for a couple of months and they said, oh, it's worked perfectly fine, but that's for a couple of months. I've had SD cards last me years. Just because something's more familiarly branded like SanDisk or something like that, it doesn't actually mean it's more reliable 100%. I was in the market for some CF Express Type A cards. I already do own some. I got two 80GB Sony cards, but at a recent event, I found out that I was more or less maximizing the capacity on those cards. So I wanted to get some more CF Express, but expand the storage and just go for a larger capacity. I couldn't quite justify spending it on Sony's because those are astronomical in terms of price, but then I came across this brand called Pergear. Their CF Express Type A cards are actually more comparable to SD cards UHS-2 V90 that Sony make, but the speeds stated on the specs are actually a lot faster than SD cards still. So I wanted to get something to see for myself if they're any good. My concern with these Pergear memory cards is the fact that there's a lot of metal on there, so I was wondering how it would handle the heat. I don't actually know 100% that if it's metal, it's going to actually dissipate heat faster or if it's just going to get hotter much quicker. But one of the concerns before I bought it was if I was to use it in my camera and it was generating a lot of heat, would that affect my camera? So I was a little bit worried about that. And then this is why I decided to change the direction of this video, because I actually had recorded this video previously. And that is the fact that I took it out of my Sony a7S III, which is just the one I'm talking into at the moment. And as I took it out, the CF Express Type A card was very hot, as well as the handle. And that's not something that I usually have felt in the past. There's one thing that I should note to this is that I was actually shooting on the XAVCS-I codec, which is not a codec I typically use. So in the last video that I recorded, which I have now obviously since deleted, was just stating a basic product overview, comparing the primes to the standard Pergear CF Express Type A cards, and basically saying that I would do a follow-up review in 6 months' time to a year. Just a very quick discussion on the whole standard versus prime. The standard CF Express Type A cards actually state on the memory card 780 megabits a second, whereas the prime only state 400. So on the surface level, it does look like the standard outperformed the prime, but the prime cards are more expensive. What I find strange about this is the prime cards are stating sustained writing speeds, whereas the standard cards are stating peak speeds. So you may be able to reach 780 megabits, but when you take into consideration heat and the amount of capacity you're using in the memory card, things will start to slow down. Whereas on the primes, it states a sustained 400 megabits a second. So therefore, I would actually be more inclined to go with consistency over than pure peak speeds. So as we can't test for reliability because I can't fast forward time, I'm just going to do some quick tests now. I'm going to use the memory card reader that was bundled with the Pergear CF Express Type A card, but I'm also going to use the official Sony CF Express Type A card reader. I'm going to be testing both the genuine memory card as well as the Pergear. So moving over to my laptop, here's the original video that I recorded earlier. It's a 65.8 gigabyte video file. As before, I recorded it in XAVCS-I, and that codec is running at 500 megabits a second. So it's a very meaty file. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to transfer that video file to the CF Express Type A memory card to see how long that will take to copy over. That will test the timings for the write speed. And I've chosen to use a very large file like this because I wanted to see if it does sustain that type of speed for the duration of the copy. Once it's copied over to the memory card, I'm also going to copy it back to the desktop just to see how fast it reads. Then I'll be using Blackmagic software to run the test as well to see what readings that software is picking up from these memory cards. I'm going to leave a few minutes in between just to allow everything to cool down a little bit. And then I'm going to run the test once more, but I'm going to be using the Sony memory cards. These tests will first be done on the CF Express Type A card readers from Pergear, and then I'll run the exact same test again, but I'll be using the Sony memory card reader. One thing to note about the CF Express Type A card reader is that I actually purchased a bundle from Amazon. The memory card reader that I was expected to receive also included an SD card slot. This is the newer memory card reader from Pergear, and from another reviewer, he actually states that it's actually a faster memory card reader than this one. But the trouble is, I've actually ordered this twice now, and twice they've sent me the wrong memory card reader. But nonetheless, I do actually have the Sony memory card reader, which should be deemed as the gold standard. In the interest of fairness, I will actually be using the cable supplied with each memory card reader as well. So there's nothing much more to discuss. Let's just get to the test. First off, the CF Express Type A card reader from Pergear. Plugging into the USB port. And then here is the Pergear CF Express Type A card. So as you can see, the memory card is completely empty. Now let's run a speed test. Now it's actually quite hot to the touch. It's not going to burn me, of course, but it is very warm. I think it was a larger surface and it was that temperature, it would be quite uncomfortable. Because it's quite small in that temperature, it's tolerable. The memory card reader doesn't feel too bad, but the memory card itself was pretty hot. The Sony is consistently outperforming the Pergear by about 100 megabits a second, which I would expect it to perform better. But the thing that I'm actually really surprised at, well, not even say surprised, I'm actually happy to see, I should say, is that the Pergear is actually upholding its consistent above 400 megabit sustained speed. What the Blackmagic software does is copies over a 5 gigabyte file and to see how fast it can transmit across, back and forth for the read and write speeds. So a 5 gig file may not be large enough for it to generate enough heat for a couple transfers. I allowed the test to run 3 times, so it goes back and forth 3 times. And that's in between each time I copied over a 65.8 gigabyte file. So in regards to the Sony memory card, it's only 80 gigabytes, so 65.8 gigabytes is almost maxing it out. So it still managed to sustain a good speed throughout the transfer process alongside the tests. The Pergear also managed to remain consistent, but it's also worth noting that it's got much more headroom in the sense that the maximum capacity is 260 gigabytes. So all in all, long-term reliability, we can't judge until we have long-term tests. But in terms of the speed test I've just done now to test out the consistency of the speeds and the sustained speeds, they seem quite accurate to what they're marketing, so that's a very good positive. So on average, they would actually perform faster than these UHS-2 SD cards, and they're very comparable in price. You can get cheaper SD cards like Angel Bird or ProGrade, but if I was just to compare it to like the genuine Sony ones, they are actually very comparable. The test you just saw I actually completed last week, so this is just a quick wrap up and conclusion of the tests. Overall, do I recommend the Pergear CF Express Type A cards? And 100% I do. The price of them actually kind of works out a bit cheaper than, say, the UHS-2 cards from Sony. The speeds are accurate in terms of what they're claiming to sustain. So overall, when it comes to price and value, I think 100% is definitely worth a go. You can't 100% guarantee reliability, and that's even coming from reputable brands. So I'm willing to give Pergear a shot based off the cost of value benefit here. Overall, the Sony CF Express Type A cards perform about 100 megabits per second better than the Pergear ones, but they are also probably like 3 to 4 times more expensive. The Pergear CF Express Type A cards actually allow you to access all the codecs available to you on the Sony cameras. At this point in 2024, I really don't see a downside of these cards. Over time, we'll know if there's going to be any reports of any like card failures and so forth, but until then, they get a recommendation from me. I purchased these with my own money, and I will plan on purchasing more at some point when I need them, unless of course I hear stories of otherwise being unreliable. But until then, nothing but positive things to report on it, and they get a recommendation from me.